Hello and welcome back to another flute tip of the week. As you can tell, this is a very different angle that we are shooting at, because today is the day. Yes, it is indeed the day. We are going to be taking apart a flute. One of my students, she finally got a new flute for herself, and so I'm going to be taking apart Old Faithful. Although not quite Old Faithful. This is something that would tend to fall apart for no apparent reason. That's what happens when you get something for 50 quid on Gumtree. But it is an excellent flute to be able to demonstrate some things that anyone of any skill level would be able to look at and either see if it's something that they can fix quickly on their own, or if it's something that they need to bring to a shop. And at least if you do need to bring it to a shop, you can describe it to them on the phone so that they will know how long they're going to have it gone for. Sometimes it's something they'll be able to fix in 10 minutes. Other times they might need to take a lot apart. And of course, there are going to be times during the year where the maintenance shops are going to be absolutely packed with instruments. And this is usually to do with school holidays where students suddenly have the time to send their flutes in because they don't need them every day, to just before exam season, and always either at the very beginning of the summer or at the end of the summer. Basically, anytime there's a holiday, it's going to be quite busy in there. So to be able to carefully look after your instrument and make sure that you don't need to get rid of it for a long period of time, it is good to know what to look for when you are experiencing problems with your flute. And so that is what we're talking about today. So let's get to it. Understand how your flute is put together so that you can either do minor fixes yourself or properly identify the problems that are happening so that you can bring them to a professional. In this video, first I'll be showing you simple things that you would be able to fix yourself, and then gradually go from simple problems to a little bit more advanced to then just taking the flute apart so that you know exactly what it looks like without anything attached. I'm quite excited for this, so let's get started. As you can see, today I'm experimenting with having a new camera on the side. So of course, the first thing that we're always going to be looking for is if there are any problems regarding leaks. A leak typically happens either when the pad inside the cup has gotten too thin on one side just from consistent use, or from things coming out of alignment in terms of different screw placements. Remember that a couple of videos ago I was talking about fixes on the piccolo and how the corks react to each other. That was a preface to understand how the different screws with the plates actually work in terms of getting things to seal at the same time. So as I said, sometimes leakages will be due to pads thinning in the wrong places, and you don't always have to replace your pads. You can sometimes get a shim. However, you can also get leaks when you have something called double action happening. So basically, double action is when you move a key and then once you're already moving it, you feel something else hit. And that will be as a result of things being out of alignment. So as you can see, there are lots of different levers and feet underneath the rods at the back. And these all react with one another and kind of create a somewhat jigsaw puzzle so that all the keys that are attached to each other will move at the same time. But double action will happen when the screws that are on these little plates in the back are not the right length. Now with this flute, there are only two spots that have a little bit of double action, so it's not that terrible. First, we have it with the A key. There's some very slight double action happening between these two keys, because as you see, I've lightly pressed that, and then the other one moves as well. You can always tell this by very lightly touching the key, and if you feel something attach after you've already started moving it, that is when you have double action. And even when it's something as slight as this, it can still cause problems, especially when it's higher up on the flute, because it means that there is a vent near the top, and the lower you go, the more that's going to affect your sound. The other double action happening on this flute is on the E key. So when you push this down, there is a moment before the lever finally attaches and hits this one, because she has a split E mechanism on this flute. So if you take a look at your flute as well, you will see that behind the E key, there is a paddle that has two screws on either side of it. And on this flute, there is, it looks like almost a bit of tape that has been put around that screw, and is also come out a little bit farther than the other screw. What I'm going to do is I'm going to just lightly tighten it And what that'll do is it'll make it longer on the other side of the paddle so that it connects with the key a little bit sooner. And remember that because it is a very small space, you want to make sure not to make enormous adjustments, because if you do that, you could cause a little bit of problems all up the flute. It's always about going in very, very small spaces. And now there's no more double action. So now that is moving perfectly together. Another common problem that happens when you're not necessarily careful enough when you're putting your flute in its case is having trouble with your A flat key. Now what happens quite frequently actually is someone will put their flute in kind of haphazardly, and that'll cause this key to bend, because this key itself is actually very easily malleable. Like, it doesn't even take very much to suddenly have it grinding against one of these keys. And so you always want to be careful when you're putting your flute away that you are not trying to force anything in. If you feel a resistance in your case, double check. I think I've had about 6 people come to me saying that their flute wasn't working and they didn't know what was going on, and it was a case of the A flat key being pushed against the G keys. So just take extra care when you're putting your flute in a case, especially if it's an older case and maybe it was built a little bit too tight for the flute itself. Now I'm going to show you what it looks like when you take off your thumb key. Now here I'm having a little bit of a problem with the thumb key because things are moving quite slowly. And one thing that could be a cause of that is old oil that is actually just getting stuck and making it so that it doesn't move smoothly. So we're going to take it out. Whoever worked on this last, I think they glued this in. This could also be an indication of how old the oil is. If you're not even able to take the screw out smoothly, then it just means that no wonder anything can shift at all. There we go. Now that we've got that out, we can shift these out. There. Whew. Let's take a look at just how dirty that screw was. See all of that black line right there. And now what we're also going to do, we're going to take out some trusty pipe cleaners. So we're going to dip the end in a little bit of water and then put it through the space of the B flat key so that it can clean out what's going on there. And I'm using a white pipe cleaner so that you can see how much it's going to be coming off. And you always want to make sure to pull it straight through. Like, you don't want to go back and forth because otherwise you can get rid of some of the threads on there. Now, while I've got this off, I'm going to give it a little bit of a clean because everything is a little bit gunky right now, and it's a wonder that things were actually moving at all. Also, if you're in a case where you do have a key off, I'm going to show you a really simple way just to get some of the dirt off of it. You get some Q-tips and a little bit of water. So just dip the Q-tip in the water and then just lightly brush at it. And so already that just took off quite a bit of gunk. So that's going to help seal it up a little bit better. We're also going to give this just a little bit more of a clean because as I'm touching this, the old oil is still coming off of the key and it's quite slippery and sticky to hold on to. So just going to give that a little bit of a wipe down. Look at all of that that's just come off of there. And don't forget that you also need to clean up where the thumb keys were connecting in the first place. So right in here. We've really got some black stuff going on in there now. Now that that's all clean, we're going to put a little bit of oil onto the screw itself and then just put a little bit onto these little sections here so that everything will move very smoothly against each other, especially now that things are clean and the oil isn't old. It's not going to be getting in the way of the friction anymore. But we do need a little bit of oil just to be able to make sure that things don't get stuck over time. And we'll put a little bit of oil where the screw is going to be going in. One thing that'll also be good to do, I will be taking the flute apart again, as I said, but also do a little bit right here. So if you do happen to have your thumb key off, because you've decided to be very adventurous, then just give a little bit of a clean around the tone hole as well. Yeah, we can see that some of the old oil had gotten around here as well, and of course a little bit of normal tarnish. Okay, now we can put it back on. And there! Now we've got a really nice clean, very easily working B-flat key. Once in a while, if you find that you're continuously having some difficulty getting your head joint in, this is when you want to clean a little bit inside. Now that we've done on that side, we need to do a little bit on this one as well. And you can tell it's one of my students because she had a stamp on the head joint. One thing that I will use quite frequently if I have a student whose flute just won't go together very easily, if the foot joint is very difficult to put in, then I'll use a little bit of cork grease, like for a piccolo or even for a clarinet. Because all this does is it just gives a little bit of slippage so that it's easier to turn it. You don't necessarily want to use so much that it's going to make it almost easy to fall off. But really all it does is it allows to have a bit more of a slick surface so that you're able to get it on. Now another thing to look at is if your flute hasn't been adjusted in a long time, you might want to double check that the cork is still in the right place. And what you'll do is you'll be using the cleaning rod that you have in your flute case. And all you'll need to do is put the end of the cleaning rod where you don't put the cloth and just put that on the inside of the flute. And there will be 3 lines that you can see. And the one in the middle should be smack in the middle of where the embouchure hole is. So for this one, her cork is bang in place. And so that means that everything in terms of tuning the relationship between the tone holes is working in the right place. If the cork was a little bit too far up or a little bit too close, then that would severely impact the relationship between the spaces of the keys. Because the way that the flute is made is with very, very precise measurements of distance between each tone hole, which result in the flute and various notes being in tune. However, it is also why the C sharp is quite notorious for us, because as you can see, we are stuck with something that is a little bit high up. And even if we just slightly adjust how wide that hole is, it can throw the entire flute out of whack. If you put a little bit of some sort of adhesive on the inside and make the hole smaller, then it might lower the C sharp, but it also means that it's going to affect your high C sharp, which is already typically a little bit flat, and severely impact your high D. Another thing that might happen once in a while is one of your springs might come loose. And for this, you would need an exact tool for this purpose. This tool basically looks like a little crochet hook, except it's very thin and very flat. On the very end of it, there is a curved point so that you're able to push a spring. And then underneath, where it has the little head part, there is another curve so that you can pull it again. So if it happens to come out on its own, because once in a while you can just suddenly have a spring come out and then you literally spring leak. But if that does happen, you're able to just push that back in. And occasionally, if you do end up wanting to take various keys off, always make sure to release the springs, because otherwise you could cause them to snap. And if they snap, to be honest, you're in the crap, because it takes a lot of precision for someone to be able to replace a spring, because those are the parts of the flute that basically never get replaced. So you want to make sure that you never push them too far or pull them too tight, because that could cause them to snap. And if they snap right at the base, it means that they're going to have to take out that whole post to be able to get the old spring out and a new spring in. Unless it is absolutely necessary to take something off, I really don't recommend messing with your springs. That takes care of us talking about minor fixes that you can do. I'm going to take this baby apart. And so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to have the video just go in fast forward so that you can watch as I take it apart and clean it and then put it back together. I'll do it first with the foot joint. clean and shiny. So again, that tip was understand how your flute is put together so that you can either do a small fix yourself or know exactly what you need to tell the person when you bring it in to get repaired at a shop. I hope you find this week's tip helpful, or at least interesting. I'm going to take apart the rest of the flute now and clean it because that's always good fun. I'll see you all next week. Flute happy, build happy, and have an appreciation for your local flute doctor. It is such a relief that my coffee table in my living room is able to rise up to the occasion of me needing to actually put a lot of stuff on it. And what's amazing is that it folds out and comes up to full height so that I've got room to do all of this. Suddenly, I've got all the space I need to do repairs and watch Bob's Burgers. I need something to listen to while I'm fixing these things.